Hi everyone, I'm Jodi Barrows with The Square and a Square. Welcome to our 4 o'clock story time. The quilt behind me is the quilt called Country Barn. You can find the pattern and the kit for this at our website, squareandasquare.com. We are reading the Threads series. The first book is Threads of Change, then there's Threads of Home, and we are currently in Threads of Courage, and we are about halfway through on the book. We'll be starting at chapter 18 on page 128. April 1860. Jeremiah Longmont drove his wagon load of family members into town early that morning, stopping at the school first. He helped his daughters Daisy and Lily down from the wagon. Daniel jumped down from the back and sprinted up the schoolhouse steps. Abby opened the door to let Daniel in and called out to Katie Longmont, "I'll see you later this afternoon." Holding Iris, Katie waved as she smiled excitedly. "We will leave plenty of quilting for you. Come as quickly as you can." With a snap of the reins, Jeremiah urged his horses to move on. He turned the wagon and headed to the front door of Liz's Mercantile. Jeremiah helped Katie and Iris safely down from the wagon. "I'll be at Samuel's for a short while, then I'll be back later this afternoon." He kissed Katie, then Iris on the cheek, and bounded with long strides across the street and up the steps to Samuel's law office. Samuel sat at his desk, waiting and holding a letter. "Good morning," an out-of-breath Jeremiah greeted Samuel. He shut the door behind him and didn't wait for Samuel to reply. Every man in the whole county was waiting for news about the political parties convening. The Democrats had been first with an April date for their convention in Charleston, South Carolina. "Good morning, Jeremiah." Samuel swallowed a gulp of coffee. The first platform placed for a vote was pro-slavery. It was rejected, and the delegates from 8 states walked out, forcing an adjournment. They couldn't agree on a presidential candidate for the party. "So we wait again?" Jeremiah asked, trying to understand. "Yes, the Republicans hold their convention in Chicago next month." Samuel's brow wrinkled with concern. "I'm sure the candidate will be Lincoln, and he is already making visits to the southern states. He talks against separation and pleads with the leaders for a compromise." "Lincoln sounds like a good man." Jeremiah looked for something good to hang on to. "Why can't our president do anything about this now?" "Both houses are working on proposals, but President Buchanan has done little, which has only fanned the flames. His cabinet is furious with him. He's lame now." Jeremiah listened. "So this Lincoln sounds like he's trying." "Yes, he's cautious concerning the slavery issue, but insistent that slavery cannot be expanded into the new territories." "Well, that idea sounds good to me. Why can't the pro-slavery southern states go with that?" Jeremiah thought Mr. Lincoln's plan sounded both feasible and workable. "We can always hope, Jeremiah." Samuel didn't think things would end well. He knew too many proud hotheads. With each state having voting rights, the slavery issue could be voted down. Katie and Iris jingled the bell on the Mercantile door, announcing their arrival. "Good morning, ladies," Liz called to them cheerfully. "Hi, Liz. Can you have this small list ready for Jeremiah when he comes across from Samuel's in a bit? I don't think he will be long. He just wanted to see if Samuel had gotten a letter." "Sure I can." Liz took the list and briefly went over it to see if she had any questions. "Looks easy enough." Liz smiled at her friend and her sweet little girl. "You know, Maddie can't wait for Iris to come over and play today. Yesterday, all day long, she planned what the girls were to play today." Liz giggled, thinking back on her little girl. "I hope she isn't too bossy with Iris. Sophie and Hope rose today. She has it all in her head just as she thinks it should be." Katie laughed, knowing the personalities of all the little girls. "Iris just thinks she should be one of the sisters. She can't understand why she has to be home while the others are in town." "Well, I finally took down the old lace curtains we brought with us from Louisiana and put some new cotton curtains I made. Since Abby's wedding, those lace curtains have turned into wedding play clothes. I don't know how many times we can play wedding, but those curtains have been the favorite for many days." Katie listened, imagining the fun of the day for the little girls. I'm going to pick up a spool of quilting thread and take it with me. Please add it to the list. Oh, it can be my donation to the quilting since I will miss most of the day. Thanks, Liz. I wish you and Abby could come this morning. We'll miss you, but we'll save some quilting for you this afternoon. I already told Abby so. Katie, you and Iris can go out the back door to the house. No reason to walk all the way around. Katie picked up her basket, placed the spool of thread in it, and led Iris out the back door. Good morning, Emma was cheery as she came out the back door of her restaurant. And to you, Katie called as she helped Iris down the step. They both watched Iris run to the porch of the Maley home. I don't know who is more excited for the quilting, the little girls or the ladies, Emma said as she got in step with her friend Katie and walked the short way to the house. I guess regardless of our age, we enjoy the company of our friends and the adventure. My Iris has talked for days about when we come to Maddie and Sophie's house in town, Katie explained. Are you sure Hope Rose will stay all day too? The question between the two were endless. I suppose it has been a long spell for the four of them too, Emma replied as she listened to her friend. Megan had the house ready with the quilt frame set up. The back of the quilt was sewn together so it appeared as one large piece of cloth. The backing would be laid first on the frame with a large sheet of cotton batting placed on top of the quilt. Anna Parker was first to arrive at the quilting since she had the quilt to be put in the frame. Anna unfolded the scrappy turkey tracks, piece top, and stretched it out over the layer of cotton batting. Megan put Lydia in her cradle and spread a light blanket over the sleeping baby. Oh, Anna, she exclaimed, the green border and sashing are just perfect for your scrappy blocks. The two women worked, smoothing the 3 layers and pinning each section as they went. You surely love those long, thin triangles and diamonds. I think they are in every quilt you make, Megan complimented her friend. Anna had learned from her mother how to make a diamond shape, then cut it up and use it whole to make beautiful blocks. The pattern appeared in every quilt her mother had made and somewhere in most of Anna's quilts also. Where did the green fabric come from? Megan asked as she stretched the outside edges and pinned it to the frame on the edge of the wooden quilt frame. She didn't recall it coming from the general store. Anna stood and rubbed her lower back. Tex brought a good length to me the last time he went to Austin. Megan nodded, wondering if her friend was feeling well. That was nice of him. Do you know where he is or what he's up to? No, I haven't heard for sure, but I would guess he is with the political group discussing the nominations and guessing what the southern states will decide. This talk of secession is strong, Anna said in a chair as the women looked at each other silently. Anna said, Are we ready to roll the quilt now? Rolling her side of the quilt to almost the middle, Megan said, I'm sure it's important and he's fine. She paused. Let's try to keep the talk away from the political news. We want to get away from our worries today. Anna nodded her head in agreement as she rolled her side of the quilt. Anna's little girl, Hope Rose, bounded through the doorway. She had insisted upon waiting on the porch for her friends to arrive. Maddie and Sophie were right behind her. Maddie stated, matter of fact, Iris is here now. We will be playing on the porch. The 3 turned with the announcement and went back out the door, bounding down the steps, all in a chatter. Katie released the hand of her youngest as Iris twisted to run ahead and meet the other little girls. The sounds of jumping and squealing filled the air. They were so excited for a day of play. Maddie gathered Iris, Hope, Rose, and Sophie around a pint-sized table for tea and muffins. Maddie glanced up as Emma and Katie came up the steps, laughing at the commotion the little ones were making. We will be on the porch if you need us, she informed them. Well, thank you, Maddie, Katie replied with her best tea party voice. Who has the new little wagon? Katie remarked as she passed it at the bottom of the steps. Emma looked back as she held the door open for Katie. I'm not certain, but it sure is cute. They already have a couple of dolls loaded up in it. Why do we wait so long to get a quilting together? Megan asked as she hugged and welcomed her 2 friends. I think it was winter time, and then you had a baby early and scared us all half to death. Katie hugged Megan. Then this thing called a prairie fire came along. We buried a good lady, had a wedding, sent Luke off to somewhere, and we haven't counted the cougars and the coyotes. Katie pulled the chair out at the frame. I think that's a pretty full past several months. Speaking of coyotes, Anna asked, any news on Callie the cat? I hate to ask with the little girls so close by. She looked to the open doorway and lowered her voice. Yes, Megan replied. It hasn't been long enough to tell, but Lulu stitched up Callie and is keeping her at the cabin. The cat should have been dead from the encounter, but somehow she is still with us. Emma chuckled. Well, if Maddie's prayers are as persistent with God as she is with us. The group started laughing, all knowing and loving Liz's little girl, Maddie. Katie had about 8 needles already threaded on the spool of thread. She took the spool in her left hand and loosely kept back 7 needles as she pulled 1 needle and a length of thread out and away from the spool. She nipped the thread with scissors and passed the threaded needle to Megan. Katie repeated the process for Anna, then Emma, and lastly for herself. Then she put the spool with 4 threaded needles remaining threaded on the spool in the middle of the quilt top. Each woman knotted the end of her thread and slid the needle into the top layer of fabric, hiding the knot in the middle cotton layer. Emma placed her left hand under the quilt top and leaned slightly over the frame. Taking the needle in her right hand, she slid 1 stitch under the top layer of fabric and pulled the thread gently to pop the knot at the end of the thread under the top layer. She checked to make sure it was smooth and nestled in the cotton fiber. Then she pushed the needle down into the quilt slightly next to the first stitch. When she felt it with her finger under the quilt, her top hand gently pushed the needle to the left and up to the top of the fabric, then back down again, doing a rock and roll back and forth with the needle. When the needle was full of stitches, it was pushed all the way through, and the needle and thread came through the layers of the quilt, making several tiny stitches that held the 3 layers in place. The women worked quietly at first, loading stitches on the needle, then pulling the remaining thread through the pattern. After a length of time, Megan asked, Emma, have you seen Chet lately? I don't recall seeing him in town. No, he hasn't been in town. I haven't seen him in several weeks. With everyone so busy, he stayed at the ranch. They're down 1 cowboy now with Luke gone, she answered without really looking up. Last time he was in town, it was just a short visit at Abby's wedding. He seemed distant or upset. I wasn't sure which. You would have thought I couldn't boil water. He usually loves my food. Emma, you can make a sap taste good, and everyone knows that, Katie remarked with a shake of her head. I'd stop cooking for a man who didn't compliment me every now and then. Men aren't complicated, Anna interjected matter-of-factly. We just make them out to be. Now, Emma, do you know any reason for Chet to be out of sorts with you? Emma stopped sewing and looked up with surprise. No, we usually are, well, just friendly. She stumbled over her words. Megan stopped her work and joined in. Emma, have you and Chet ever talked about the future? Are you just friends? Maybe Chet wants more in a relationship. Katie stopped sewing a while. Emma felt all eyes focused on her. I don't know what he wants. I'm happy being the only one not married. If he wants more, then I may have to find a new friend when I need a male chaperone. Just be careful, Emma, Katie warned. You may be saying shoo, cat, shoo, when someone else is saying, here, kitty, kitty. Emma sat up straighter and blinked a couple of times at her friends. At that moment, Little Dove opened the front door of the Maley home, and the voices of the little girls who were giggling on the porch floated in with her. Little Dove had grown into a beautiful woman with her dark, expressive eyes and long dark hair, which today was braided and coiled slightly to one side on the back of her head. Emma was happy to see her, abruptly ending the conversation. Truth be told, she was tired of trying to figure out things with Chet. Hi, everyone, Little Dove greeted them. Liz wanted me to tell Katie that Jeremiah took all the items on the list. Katie nodded in approval at Little Dove. Thank you. Emma, the ones you thought would come for breakfast, did. They enjoyed your biscuits and took some cinnamon rolls with them for later. Luther Wheeler, the new Smithy, said to tell you hello, that breakfast was good as always, and that a lunch in a sack was perfectly acceptable. He said you should have a day off for quilting. Emma smiled and laughed. Mr. Wheeler was a nice man, chatty, but never talked about himself. Thank you, little dove. Did you take the sack lunches to Liz at the store? Yes, the young woman replied. She thought it was smart for you to have prepared meals for the unexpected. Perfect. Do you want to stay and quilt? Anna asked. Yes, but I told the little girls I would come back and have tea on the porch with them. They were having so much fun with those silly curtains. Poor Sophie had to walk the aisle 3 times before she got it right. They all chuckled at the wedding taking place on the porch. Oh, I also told Liz I would help her some today. You are a much-needed worker today and always. Thank you. Anna looked at her daughter, who had come to her 4 years ago in need of a family. Tex was exactly right to steer her their way. At 15 years of age, she was fast becoming a grown woman. Liz popped over briefly at lunchtime to see how the work on the quilt was progressing. Mr. and Mrs. Wilton were in town earlier this week, Liz commented. He said Saturdays were just getting too busy and he would continue to come during the week instead. What is it, Liz? Katie inquired, seeing Liz was still contemplating some matter. I just feel sorry for Fanny Wilton. Why? Katie asked again. She is a woman who cares about herself and her home. I know she can cook well, and she's got another baby boy after her first little boy died when we first came to town, but she always seems so meek around her husband. She seems to be grateful for all he does for her, like she doesn't deserve it. Quietly, more to herself, Emma said, more man trouble. What did you say? Megan asked Emma to repeat her thoughts. Oh, nothing. You would just think that all of that would keep a man around long enough to be loved. Does he even love his wife? I would think a foolish man would bring out the bad behavior in a woman or vice versa. Katie added her thoughts to the conversation. Today, Liz continued, Fanny said she was purchasing kerosene to rub on her bedpost to keep insects from crawling up on the bed. She was also putting jar lids of water under each of the 4 bedposts, but only after she had tightened the ropes on the bed. Did you know to do that? I mean, about the spring remedies, of course. Everybody knows about tightening the ropes on the bed, Liz added. Anna didn't say a word to the others about Fanny being a mail-order bride. She remembered the day they came to Parker to get married. She had been extremely shy and quiet. Anna guessed that Fanny didn't think she deserved anything. The ladies stopped quilting long enough to eat lunch together, continued to enjoy each other's company. After the little girls playing on the porch had been fed, Liz and Little Dove went back to work at the mercantile. Sophie, the youngest of the little girls, started to cry. What is it, honey? Her Aunt Megan asked and picked up the little girl, who was now leaning on her lap. I don't want today to be over, she sniffled. Honey, don't be sad that it will be over. Be happy that today happened. Megan encouraged her and stroked Sophie's silky hair. Soon her eyes were shut, and Megan laid her on the bed for a nap. Chapter 19. The afternoon wore away. The ladies stitched and chatted and unrolled the quilt as more of each section was completed. Anna stopped and stood for a moment, arching and stretching her back. Megan couldn't help but notice the contours of the round tummy showing through the skirt of her friend. Her eyes went up and met Anna's with a big smile. Anna chuckled. Well, I guess Megan is going to let the cat out of the bag. What, Megan? Katie asked, looking at Megan, then to Anna, as to what the news would be. Me, Megan replied coyly. I think it's Anna's news. All eyes went to Anna. She smiled and placed her hands on the fullness of her tummy. Yes, I think it's been long enough. I'm not going to be able to keep it quiet much longer. I can't believe I could have another baby. I lost a little boy after Hope rose, but it's been a long while, and now this one should arrive in the fall. You know, I usually don't talk about it till I'm pretty sure I can keep the baby growing. Anna beamed as she spoke of her new baby. Katie looked at Anna. I so hope you continue to feel well and the baby can grow and be born into your family. Hope Rose will be so excited. We will be in prayer for you. I'm sorry about your little boy, Emma said with sympathy. She didn't know about this baby Anna had lost. She knew her friend had lost more babies than Emma could count. Once again, she thought of marriage and babies and death, especially the deaths of people you love, and even those you didn't get to know. And sweet Anna, why her? Emma's questions were a whisper to God. Abby dismissed her students just a bit early. She wanted to get to the quilting as soon as she could. This day has warmed to be a beautiful Texas spring day, she thought as she hurried to Liz's mercantile. When she entered the general store, she noticed Little Dove and Liz were busy in different areas of the store. Liz looked up, spotted Abby, and glanced at the clock on the wall. Oh my, this day has flown by, Little Dove. I'm going with Abby to the house for the rest of the afternoon. Just let me know if you need help. Little Dove nodded. Yes, Miss Liz, I will. Abby walked to the back door of the store and waited a moment for her cousin. Down the steps they went, chatting about their day as they started towards the house. Liz watched the amusement as the little girls continued to play on the front porch. Maddie stood on the steps with a pan in her hand. Iris had a doll and placed it in the new wagon with her. Hope, Rose, and Sophie sat with the lace curtains draped around their shoulders, sipping tea at the tiny table on the porch. When Maddie saw her mother and Aunt Abby, she started to run down the steps. Halfway down, she skidded to a stop and suddenly let out a blood-curdling scream. The ladies inside ran to the door, nearly upsetting the quilt frame. They stood on the porch looking for Maddie and trying to figure out why she was continuing to scream. Liz and Abby started to run. As Liz came closer, she spotted the reason for the eldest's screams of terror. A large timber rattler had curled up underneath the little play wagon where Iris and her baby doll were sitting, completely unaware of the danger lurking below. Liz knew immediately that the afternoon sun's rays of warmth directly below the porch and across the wagon had sent the rattler seeking shade. Iris noted everyone looking at her and started to wiggle in the wagon, disturbing the coiled rattler. The snake raised its head and hissed. The wagon's shaking above the snake, Maddie screaming in front of the snake, and the group of frightened women surrounding the snake effectively prevented the predator from retreating. The alarmed snake began to posture and prepared to strike. If Iris stepped out of the wagon, the snake might strike her. Even worse, seeking a way of escape, the snake could even crawl up into the low wagon. What to do, Liz thought. Taking control of the situation, Liz began issuing orders. Maddie, stand still, Liz commanded her daughter. Iris, she firmly called, be very still, honey. Don't move. We're going to get you. Ladies, Liz called out, anyone have a gun? We do in the house, but it's not a pistol. Iris will be injured, Megan sighed. Okay, think quickly, ladies. Liz didn't take her eyes off the snake. I'll keep the snake's attention. Emma, can you go behind the post, hang on the porch rail, and grab Iris and swing her up and away from the wagon? Yes, Emma answered as she scurried over to the side out of the snake's view. Anna, hang on to me. Maddie, you're doing good. Be real still, honey. In a minute, I'm going to tell you to hurry back to the porch. Big tears rolled down Maddie's cute, chubby cheeks. As she looked at her mother, she scarcely nodded, letting her know she understood. Iris, you're doing good, honey. Emma's going to help you. Liz knew she still had the snake's attention as it coiled into a defensive stance and continued to vigorously shake its rattlers. She maintained a constant distance of the length of the rattler, staying out of reach, should it launch itself in an instantaneous thrust at her, trying to strike her. Abby, go back to the mercantile and get my colt at the register. Abby obeyed immediately, turning without a word and running towards the store. Emma, I'm going to get the snake to strike at me. You grab Iris when I do. Liz pulled a length of fabric slowly from her basket, draping it across her arm, keeping a tight hold on one end. She hurled the long piece of cloth at the snake. The angry rattler struck immediately, catching the fabric with its fangs. As Emma reached for Iris, Katie quickly reached down and pulled the terror-stricken Maddie back onto the porch. Hope Rose hid behind her mother's skirt, waiting for Maddie. Emma lunged out, pulling Iris from the wagon and dragging her across the porch railing. The plan of action seemed to work quickly and seamlessly. Everyone had waited for the snake to lunge at Liz before taking action. But the unexpected happened. Liz stumbled as she pulled the fabric back towards her. Only then did she realize that the rattler's fangs had snagged into the material, and even as she pulled the cloth toward her, she was also dragging the snake toward her. Liz screamed, taking a few running steps backwards as she let go of the cloth. As she retreated, she bumped into Abby, who had returned with her Colt. Instead of handing Liz the Colt, Abby took a steady aim, pulled the trigger, and dirt shot up from the ground only inches from the snake. The aggravated rattler, which had now freed himself from the cloth, coiled to strike a second time at both Liz and Abby. The gun flashed again as Abby pulled the trigger, this time hitting the snake. A third shot rang out, finishing the job. Liz and Abby stumbled to each other, and Liz enveloped her shaking cousin in her arms. Abby's breath was uneven and hot against her shoulder. Only silence and the acid smell of gunpowder lingered. "Abby? Liz?" Megan frantically shrieked as she took a few steps off the porch and ran towards them, passing the huge dead snake, still wiggling in its death dance. Sophie, breadcrumbs on her face, toddled to the middle of the porch, having missed all of the commotion. "Mama?" she asked, and looked about. Emma put her hands around Sophie's waist and lifted her up. "She's okay, honey. Everyone is fine." No one felt like quilting anymore. The day of fun had come to a bizarre ending, and the women gathered their little girls, and they all retreated into the house. Emma slammed the front door hard and looked out the window on the door like she expected another vicious attack at any moment. Then she turned the lock, bolting the door as if to declare, "No more trouble today." Chapter 20, June 1860. Luke had now been gone for months, and Chet sorely missed him. He always had a way of perking things up. Why did he have to go and leave, Chet wondered. His dry sense of humor, matter-of-fact ways, and good looks drew a crowd, and fun times were always to be had. Sitting on the back of his horse, watching the herd of dirty livestock, Chet pondered what he wanted, really wanted. After his pa had died, he had drifted around. His mother had sold the land they had ranched and had taken his little sisters back east where they lived, close to her side of the family. He had met the Maley clan as he was drifting through Louisiana and worked at their timber mill. Then he had followed them with their dream back to Texas. He didn't know how to dream big on his own like the Maley clan did. His old boss Lucas had always said, "Love God, dream big, work hard, and never, never give up." The words of this man were branded into his brain. The low moan of the whipping wind caught his attention and ruffled his hair that toppled his collar. Last time he saw Emma, she had threatened to cut it, but he was liking it kind of long. After all, his friend Colt, the sheriff in Birdville, had really long hair. He took his hat off and wiped his face, streaking the dirt that had mixed with his sweat on the hot day. "Is this what I want?" he asked himself. Chet had never asked these questions of himself before. He had always just drifted along, not really ever having a plan. He liked his horse and working for the Rolling M Ranch, and he liked running the freight for the Mercantile on occasion. Liz and Thomas paid him well, and Emma, well, I like Emma too, he thought, even though she is a handful. But then, what girl worth having isn't? He thought some more while watching the longhorns graze on the grass. Chet liked breaking horses and was good at it. "I love a good horse," he thought, as he patted the spare pony he rode today. Thomas had many fine horses, and Chet was able to choose any horse he pleased from the herd each day. That herd was a sight too pretty for a man to look upon. The wranglers knew exactly how to gentle the horses and ready them for breaking. Luke had broken the most difficult one, but he had the best of them in Thunder. That Thunder sure were a beauty. "I sure wish Luke was around. I wouldn't feel so low," Chet told his horse as he patted her soft neck. Chet thought more about all that he had learned from Jackson since he had joined the cowboys at the ranch. That ranger knew how to break a horse the Comanche way. He had passed on those skills to Thomas and a few others at the ranch. Because of Jackson, he had thought about signing up with those rangers until the government had disbanded them. Integrity, courage, and honor, that was to be admired. He would have liked to own one of those Sam Walker Colts. Now that was a gun. His thoughts carried him to Luke again, and how Luke was carrying America's information across half the continent, binding a nation together with his Pony Express work. That job sure had its allure, a proud partnership between horse and rider. The stories fascinated the public, and the newspapers were full of stories. Luke hadn't been afraid to act on his dream. Chet, deep inside, continued to weave his way through the dancing heat waves. He needed to make up his mind about Emma. He was sure that filly could be broken, but he wasn't sure that he was the one to do it. The moan he heard this time wasn't the wind, but a spring calf caught in the thicket. He climbed down from his horse to help free the little creature. After the calf was out and went bawling to his mama, Chet stopped to dust himself off and took a good look at himself. He was a good cowboy. In fact, he was great at it. He pulled the loose, dusty hair from across his face and looked down. Worn clothing, scuffed boots, all his money locked away in a room at the bunkhouse. What am I saving my money for anyway? He mounted the unnamed horse and remembered what Tex had said to him. Your kindness or cruelty can be made known by the way you leave a trail. Just what kind of trail am I leaving? He asked out loud. Just dirt and sweat, I guess. My life's blowing here and there like the wind. Chet pushed his hat down firmly and took a swallow of water from his canteen. Yep, I need to talk to Emma and get some things settled with that girl. That's why I'm feeling out of sorts. If I can get that settled, my life will be better. With more confidence, he mounted his horse and nudged her side as they trotted to the other side of the herd. And that will continue our reading today. We will be starting with chapter 21 tomorrow. I hope you're enjoying the story. And the story of the rattlesnake under the wagon was something that happened to my mother and her sister. They were playing on the porch with some old curtains, and they did have a new little red wagon, and the snake curled up under the wagon while they were playing. And their mother was actually working in the field, the cotton field, just a little ways across the road. And when they came home for lunch, her and her daddy, her mom and dad came up and saw the snake sleeping under the wagon with the little girls in the wagon playing. And they were so thankful that the little girls didn't try to get out of the wagon when the parents weren't there. They actually were, her dad actually was able to, the wagon had a rope on it, and he was able to get the rope and pull the wagon, pulled the little girls to hang on, and he actually pulled them away from the snake. And then there was always a hoe or a shovel, because that was when she said we lived on Snake Mountain. So there's always a fire story, always a snake story, things that they lived with every day as they grew up on the prairie. Once again, I hope you're enjoying the stories of the Malay women, and we'll continue reading our story tomorrow. Bye-bye for now.